we had a meeting of people who, of Paul Morrissey, Bob Colacello, David Verdon, who is a very close friend of his, Charles Vidal, Sylvia Miles, who was one of the stars of one of his movies, Lana, whose apartment it was at, and Jed Johnson, who used to live with Andy, and then the Dr. Denton Cox, who was his close friend and doctor for 27 years, and who the New York Times wrote that he hadn't made certain, he said he hadn't given Andy a rectal examination or things that are supposed to be done before an operation. And but he told us the whole thing, how he tried to get Andy to go into the hospital weeks or months before, and how Andy had gone to a chiropractor and she mashed his gallbladder and put him in terrible pain, and that he'd done, every possible examination, that he'd gotten the best surgeon for that particular kind of operation, and the operation was a success. But things went wrong at the hospital. The nurse, she made the wrong entry on the charts. She didn't. The drainage tubes apparently. Some of that I'm quoting from the newspaper, so I'm not because he didn't go quite into that detail. He said so that the county or the city doctor, Dr. Elliot Gross, who actually doesn't have too good a reputation, but our Dr. Elliot Gross had called him and said that he congratulated him on, he'd done the best possible work and every possible thing. So he's sort of exonerated. But they're still investigating the nurses. The drainage tubes weren't turned on, and he filled up with liquid water, and it was just dreadful care at the hospital. And that the head nurse, the head nurses at the hospital were supposed to check even the private nurses, and they hadn't. That's what they're saying. So it's a big scandal. But Andy had a great memorial at St. Patrick's Cathedral, 2,000 people, then a terrific luncheon for 500. He went out in style, and it was dinner for 20 people and his family at Mr. Chow's. But Andy, after he was shot in '68, his energy level was way down. And in the book Edie, I said that the Gene Stein who wrote the book Edie had given me an interview, dinner with an enormous 3-hour interview and everything. And then she took out just one little excerpt where I said, because I loved Andy and hated him too for some things he did. But that's all coming out of my book. But she gave me this long hour, and then the thing that came out was that after Andy was shot, he became a ghost, and he was just somebody you invited to dinner parties. But Andy didn't seem upset like that. In fact, he told me in my book we were being videotaped at the Whitney Museum, and since I've been working on the book for 5 years, he said it's called Son of Andy Warhol, and Andy said, "Oh, Taylor, you can say anything you want to about me." I hope that lets me off the hook for legal problems. But he had this way of saying, "Oh yes, of course." He had this appearance of being very gentle, but he had some very tough people around him who were not gentle, and ultimately he wasn't either. Plus, he buried all our movies, so that's one reason that it's terribly important to get the book out. For 18 years, those movies have been just suppressed deliberately. And now I guess the Whitney Museum had them, or they bought them, and they're just in archives. I suppose you have to get permission from some special person to even look at them. You know, it's sick. I mean, it was so great working with that. He's the easiest person in the world to work with, and his mere presence is almost enough to tell you what you're supposed to do in front of a camera. He'll just say one or two words, and that's you'll get the idea of what he wants. But for him, and then of course he never paid us or gave us a few $100 if we went out west or something. And but then to have the movies, and then also, to me, I made almost 100 movies. Was making movies before I met Andy. Movies that became very a famous movie called The Flower Thief, which sort of put 16mm on the map. Help, that didn't pull my daisy, but Flower Thief was it was crudely made, and people looked at it and said, "Oh, anybody can make a movie." But it was also a good movie, and that really started people with their cameras and everything. And Andy had seen it, and he was turned on to doing that. And it was so great to work with. And plus, he didn't edit, so which is the happiest thing an actor can have as a director. Except all the scenes were sort of one-shot scenes. And some of the movies I edited, I simply put in sequence, and a certain kind of poetry to them, the logic, semi-logic that went through them, and I just put that in sequence. But otherwise, they were left totally alone, which was very gratifying. But then they were buried, so you can't win, you know. Then he buried them after he was shot. I don't know whether he didn't want to deal with any of the people that were in the films or what it was, or he was afraid of them. Or he just became so famous he no longer cared. He was satisfied to interview famous people and move around and with celebrities and rich people all over the world. You know, from then on he was totally welcome by kings and everybody. He was sort of an icon of the United States, or of a certain era of art, and he loved to socialize anyways. And it's it's really tragic. In a way, maybe Andy, even though he wasn't that charitable, except he was charitable in that he sort of tolerated everything, but as far as doing good works for people in general, but maybe his death in a hospital of such an important figure will save a lot of people's lives. God, I hope that's fresh. Anyway, the archivists get a hold of the films and bury them. That's a Whitney Museum, Jonas Mekas. They write great things about the films, and then it's like they think that they're such snobs. They think that their New York pals, 12 people, are the only ones who can understand, to appreciate the movies for what they really are, you know. There's a vast audience of millions of people. The awareness of young people, especially, is so incredible that there's no problem anymore. The plus with advertising. In fact, advertising borrows from some of our films, which have for very quick images, single frame images and stuff. So the public is used to that now. It used to be like my personal films were all done in single, double, triple frames that went by at 100 miles an hour. And advertising agencies used to borrow them and look at them. And this is making them in the 1960s. But when people used to watch them, they could say, "Oh, we can't." They were trying to hold on to a plot or some continuity or something. And there's no problem anymore. People are used to that. And the mind, the eye, the mind catches everything, no matter how fast it goes by. But they have these the curse of New York is it's one of the great things of New York is fantastic specialists, but they have blinders on. my misfortune is that I'm interested in everything, and I'm good at a lot of things. And but it's taken me always. Now as I get older, everything maybe it's sort of coming together, I think. But it's terrible. Like my acting career is been buried in the vaults of the Whitney Museum in a way, or in the vaults of the film archives here in New York, the anthology film archives. It's unfair. It's unfair. Whereas Hollywood is pushing all this dreadful stuff, and television is just 90% Dummkopf, including the number one show, the 15 number one show, 15 top shows are schluck, total schluck, except maybe 60 Minutes or some of the documentary news type things. Worthless crap, and it's partly a responsibility of Jonas Mekas and Andy and these people who apparently have other careers or foundations or they're mentally just concentrating on preservation and 100 years from now. Because all over the United States and in colleges, there are these theaters which are dying, or love to show any of the furthest out films you can show them. They'll just thousands of people go. The balcony. As Maxim Gorky said, keep bitter. That's the first page of my book, Son of Andy Warhol, is a quote from Maxim Gorky, keep bitter. Because the word Gorky means bitter. You know Russian at all? No. Supposedly he changed his name to Gorky, which is the Russian word for bitter, I guess. In fact, that's what I read. To remind himself. Say nasty. It's like, now we have all these rock groups, the Nasties, the Nasty Habits. I think that's a little bread. You see, in a great restaurant, the waitress comes over occasionally to say, "Is there anything you want?" Dying for bread. So then I wrote Gone with the Wind. About my career. Actually, just walking up to meet you, the most refreshing. I told you about the song in which it says it's about John Hinckley. John, why did you miss? Why didn't you kill him? You see, now there's a problem with the FCC, the Federal Communications Company. In fact, that's the most sinister thing that Ronald Reagan did. The most insidious was he let the FCC loosen its rules about advertising. So there's twice the amount of advertising on television, which just makes the American mind mush, you know. You can't watch any program that's not interrupted constantly. Movies are horribly edited, and it's constant, and no one really mentions that. But that's the most insidious thing he's done to the American mind. And now he's got the FCC going after freedom of speech and everything. That's why that WBAI put on these damning songs, and they were having demonstrations about it and everything. They won't get away with it. Because America, to me, that's the only redeeming thing about the United States is freedom of speech. which is one of the number one things of our Constitution. And otherwise, it's a horrible, dreadful, exploitative country with millions of people in jail and everything. But it's got freedom of speech, even though actually that even's kind of token. You can get in big trouble in small towns for freedom of speech. But generally, there is a basic premise, and Ronald Reagan is going after that now. They're going after that, and obviously from that song that they played, they ain't gonna get away with it. They ain't gonna get away with it. And even famous television personalities were out in the street yesterday, I guess at the UN or something, using obscenities and having a ball. And to play a song on the radio where Ronald Reagan, why don't you die? Yeah, that's really. I suppose they could come under insurrection or traitor. Actually, it might be considered inciting to violence, which actually is against the law. But it's terribly refreshing because there is not enough criticism of it. Except today on Channel 13 they had Nicaragua. In fact, he's tried to take over the public television thing and insisted that they're too radical. To me, they're just so conservative anyway. But the government considers them too leftist. It's absurd. But today they had a thing on Nicaragua which just showed how evil and dreadful what we're doing to those people is. And it's not in the name of anti-communism, it's in the name of just American business wants to get in there and rape the country some more, like they did with Somoza. We have no moral right whatsoever in any country in Central America or Mexico or anywhere. No more. We've only put terrible people in there. We've exploited, used those people. Of course, they're pretty damn stupid for being used by Americans. But what can you do? I mean, actually, I guess they're probably very gentle people who just, and their countries are so beautiful. They don't need to be movie stars and are big business people. They're probably happy with their pigs and chickens and the weather and the palm trees and whatever. Or with their poetry and music. Whereas Americans have to make it. Power. We want everything. That's what. I don't know whether Andy wanted everything, but I think he just enjoyed. I mean, coming from very humble beginnings, he enjoyed. He just enjoyed the spotlight and being around rich people. Plus, I guess he had enough aesthetic sensibility. In fact, it's nice being around rich people because generally the surroundings are nicer. You see some great paintings in their houses and stuff like that. But otherwise, I grew up in sort of that atmosphere. My father was a political boss of Michigan, actually, for 20 years. And then my mother was high society with no money. My father had a lot of money, but they didn't live together. And he was a miser. So I grew up on both sides of the track. You know the expression to grow up on the. Only I figure I grew up in the middle of the tracks because we lived in the richest suburb in America, Grosse Pointe, at the time, with some of the most beautiful houses in the world. Only we lived in a small house on small income, and yet my mother's friends were all super rich, the Fords and everybody. And we spent all our days at the country club and everything, but my father wouldn't even let my mother join the country club, so we had to get our friends to sign things. You couldn't use cash. So it was embarrassing to some extent. But I saw the way my father treated my mother and myself, and the promises he would make. And Andy, that's why my book is called Son of Andy Warhol. It compares him with my own father. He's just a liar. A great politician, magnificent. He put the most liberal man, probably in the history of the United States, into the governorship of Michigan. He later became a Supreme Court justice, who was totally for freedom of speech and everything. Wonderful, wonderful man. Totally honest. In fact, he wanted to be a priest, and my father convinced him to go into politics. And but he needed my father to give away jobs and favors and get the vote out and everything, use the mafia, whatever, to make him governor and then attorney the rest of his career. And so there's that mixed thing. So my father was extremely talented at organization and politics and things like that. But he would promise, he was a miser, and he would make promises that he wouldn't keep, and Andy's the same damn way. He's into power. They're so into power that their own families, their own people, the closest to them, they couldn't care about it. Right? It's just promise them anything, but do what you feel like. So that's one reason Andy got shot, I think. In fact, if she hadn't shot him, I might have shot him. But when he was shot, I cried for 3 days. I really was upset. 1968. We just made a movie in La Jolla, California, near San Diego. 3 days after we came back, he was shot. I was a block away at where I was living. But I cried all my tears for him in 1968. I had no tears left. And since we only saw each other at parties a couple of times a year for the last 16 years, 18 years. He made no more movies. He was afraid of us. He just wanted to hang around rich people. Yeah. He didn't want the pop. He didn't care about the popular crowd. I suppose he had. But even among rich people, there's still several 100,000 people there, you know, who buy an interview magazine. She didn't bring my wine. She bought the bread, forgot the wine. Could I have a little of yours so she'd drink? Thanks. No, I just do whatever comes along. It's easy to do a play anyway. That doesn't interfere with painting. In fact, I lost a foundation grant because I said that I also do plays and things, and they want you in your studio working and painting. To them, that's what a painting. I says I'm also interested in writing and acting and composing. I'm interested in all these things. And I said, it doesn't detract from my painting. On the contrary, I put it, on the contrary. You know, that upset them. And people who've gotten their grants, it's the Pollock Krasner Foundation. You think they'd be more liberal or something. But someone who did get a grant said, God, they call up all the time to see if you're in your studio working. And to me that's fatal, because like Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns and Andy and everybody, by turning out, they work too much. Their work is thin, it's repetitious. They should get something from life, from something else, you know, because they're putting nothing in their work. They're repeating. That's all. They have warehouses full of stuff that they just leak out to the public, you know. It's really a factory. And Andy was at least honest enough to call his place a factory, you know. Ron Rice. There was several versions of the Queen of Sheba. For one thing, in New York, about New York is it has great radio, especially used to with wonderful music. We had the radio on all the time, and we worked to music, and I had a soundtrack that was supposed to go with it. You must have seen the version that a friend of his put together a version which I totally disapproved of. And I had the right to edit Ron's films anyway, with The Flower Thief and The Queen of Sheba. But they have a version now with sound. And then, yes, in the last 2 years, I put soundtrack on because I have my own print which has no sound. I edited my own print, and then I edited the print that the anthology owns, or the cooperative, with the soundtrack that's on there. It's good. It's very good. It can't be shit. And Andy Warhol, they used to send out Chelsea Girls, which has 2 images on the screen. They would send no instructions with it, because the dialogue is really very witty. Andy deliberately picked people who make a fantastic dialogue. But they said no. So often they play the movie with both soundtracks going, so you can understand nothing. It's just all mixed up, which is very avant-garde, I guess, for 5 minutes, you know. But it usually drives everyone out of the theater. It has to be shown with the dialogue at one side of the screen turned up by itself, and then at the discretion of the projections, whatever, then shifted to the other screen. And the Queen of Sheba has to have sound. I would like to destroy the print that they send out that was done after his death. I'm very hard on filmmakers. They all die on it. They all die, or if they double-cross me, I exile them from New York. I exiled Ron Rice. Ron Rice robbed me terribly because I cashed in a life insurance policy, which my father didn't want me to do, in order to get a couple $1,000 to finish The Queen of Sheba meets the Atom. So Ron spent some of the money on dope and some on the film, but we spent all the money, and then the last few $100, we rented a big projection room at the Cooper Union, and had hundreds of people showed up, and we made a lot of money, you know? And I literally had one dime in my pocket, so we were supposed to split the money. So I said to Ron, well, where's the money? He said, oh, we put it in a night deposit in the bank. And that night, he and his girlfriend, who then became his wife, they took off on a plane to Mexico with all the money, and I was left with literally a dime in my pocket. So I told everybody what happened, including like a fool. I told my father, who helped him disinherit me too. And but I told everybody. And when Ron came back, then I told my landlady not to let Ron Rice into the building if he came back from Mexico. But he could talk, sweet talk anybody in the world. He was fantastic that way. And he had this vivaciousness that no one could resist. He was a wonderful, wonderful person when he was behaving himself. And so he got past the line. He came up to my room at the top floor of this place. He came in and I said, out, get out. And he just started talking about a new project, a new movie, like nothing had happened. And he was wearing this Mexican bride shirt. I had to start laughing. But then he went and tried to get money, borrow money for a movie. He said, Taylor, why did you tell people I robbed you? No one will give me any money. He said, I have to go back to Mexico. So I, in a way, I exiled him back. I sent him back to Mexico. And he said, it was like he was trying to lay the guilt on me. Why had I told anybody? Why not? He died in Mexico. He was a heavy drug user, and but suppose I think he got pneumonia or something, and his wife walked into the hospital, and it's another hospital case. But that's an interesting parallel you brought out. That's great. I'll put that in my book. They gave him an injection. Of course, it's notorious in Mexico. Now it's notorious in New York. Americans who go into Mexican hospitals often never come out. It's almost a cliche. And they get, because he walked to the hospital, and they obviously gave him the injection of the wrong thing, or antibiotics, or penicillin. He may have been allergic to it or something. And she came back to see him the next morning. He was dead. He was killed. He was murdered by the hospital. You don't walk into a hospital, a young man of 28 years old, vigorous, and then, or even the thing of a man of 58 or 9 like Andy was, doesn't go into a hospital, walk into a hospital, and not walk out the next day. That's a wonderful point you brought up. See, interviews are good. I don't know why my agent doesn't want me to interview. To give interviews. I was living in Mexico, 1959 or 60, and I went to the National Pawn Shop in Mexico. That's where people take their cameras and silverware and everything to get money, to borrow money. And it's illegal, it's nationalized in Mexico. So I went there and I bought this little 16 millimeter Keystone camera, the smallest 16 millimeter ever made, about this size. And then the film, I bought color film. It was color corrected lens with universal focus. And I bought color. Color film was so expensive that I thought, well, I'll just push the little single frame button, and I'll have to look at it on the viewer, on the wheels, when I get back. So that I pushed the button. Sometimes I pushed the button 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I pushed the movie button because it was something to be so interesting. And so then when I came back, and my conception when I bought the camera was that I would never edit. Never edit. Even if the film went black, I would leave it in. So I came back and showed it as a movie, and it was beautiful. It's great. And critics wrote about it, the downtown voice, and they loved it. So I started, I had a lot of those. I started showing it. Then my camera broke down, and I couldn't get a replacement for it. It was such an old, out-of-date camera. But the last time I showed the film was at a rock and roll club, a disco club, and of course they accepted it. It's just like a video, like people are doing all the time now. Only mine is one of the first, so it has that primitive, basic, strong, original quality to it. The first music video, and I play it with Bach or fast music that just increases the speed, the wonderful It was I did it all over Europe and Mexico and California and everything. So it's all these images just flash. But then with the other films, with most of the films we've done, there's almost no editing. It's just the people we've got people we trusted or that were real people and put them in an interesting situation or with another person who can interact. And that's it. It's so easy. It's so easy. Like my philosophy is from Nietzsche: a minimum of effort, a maximum of error. And I proved it by my career. But the Flower Thief, I think the Flower Thief would people in Finland would love it. Would love that. It's Ron Rice, yeah. That was done in 1960 in San Francisco. It was the end of the Beat generation scene there in North Beach. And so he filmed me wandering around talking to people and having a strange party in an abandoned factory and everything. And being crucified or shot, being shot in a park, but all very whimsical. Not whimsical, but whimsical. A movie in San Francisco called Lemon Hearts with Vernon Zimmermann, who was very influenced by Ron Rice. Ron Rice was one of those essential, like a Beethoven or something, just irresistible force. Between an idea for making a movie and doing a movie, there was no hesitation. Even without money, he would borrow money, he would write checks on his girlfriend, sign her signature, to steal her, anything to get money. Rob me, of course. When he started robbing his stars, he got in very big trouble. He died. But then with the Queen of Sheba, we were sitting in a cafe like this, and he said, I should have you work with Winifred, who was this great black lady who used to walk around the village. And I couldn't believe it. And within an hour, we're in a taxi with a camera and going around looking for locations, you know. He said, that would be, we went to Park Avenue in a big office building with a great escalator. He said, that would be an interesting thing for you and her to be coming down that escalator. So we filmed it. And then there happened to be an atomic exhibit in the building. So we said, we'll call it the Queen of Sheba meets the Atom Man. Do something with the atomic exhibit. But the original conception was just these two people, this great black lady and me in a film. That's all he needed to go on. And in The Flower Thief, it was, you know, let's film, this scene is obviously dying. You know, people are leaving or being arrested or something, or dying, or overdosing. So let's film what's left. What's left of it. And as we were filming, some of the buildings we were filming in were being torn down, and it's incredible. When with Lemon Hearts with Vernon Zimmermann at the same time as The Flower Thief, then I'm wandering around another section of San Francisco, imagining what would happen in these great old houses that were also being destroyed. And then we go up in the houses while the houses are still like leaning and everything, and improvise scenes in them. And so I played 8 different characters in a delightful film called Lemon Hearts. It's only about a half hour, I guess. And he won an award at the Museum of Modern Art as the best film by a young director. And since Ron Rice, since The Flower Thief made a lot of money in little showings, I mean, it made a few $100s a night or something, and Ron kept robbing me, he kept taking all the money for dope. So with Vernon Zimmermann, I said, well, it has to be 50-50. And he sort of laughed like, ha ha ha. I said, no, we've got to shake on that, 50-50. I've never seen it. The Museum of Modern Art gave him $2,000 award He handed me $100. He handed me $100. He's from a wealthy family. He's inherited money. He wanders around showing the film. He's never sent me a dime, and he's never made another movie with me either. And I've never heard of or about him since. So one wonders, but very talented. Lemon Hearts is a beautiful film. But one wonders why, where the balance is between talent and being keeping promises, or just being ordinary promises, or that are not that are not self-destructive. I mean, to rob your star, it's certainly self-destructive. And with a big mouth like I have, you're a damn fool. You're a damn fool. Because even if I don't sue you, I'll let you go down in history in the muck. You know, muck, is that a Finnish word? Muck? That's a universal word. Merit or muck or mud. Then, rather than kill Andy Warhol and LeRoi Jones, I was doing several plays here. And I was doing a Frank O'Hara play and a LeRoi Jones play. And I won an award as Best Actor. An off-Broadway award from the Village Voice, an Obie. So we had tremendous publicity, and we were offered. We had a temporary theater, but so we had to close it after 6 performances. But we were offered other theaters, and LeRoi Jones. We were doing a play of his. There's 2 plays in one evening. A play in which black and white people were in a church situation, and I was like a preacher or something, and there were black people. It was an integrated play, black and white. But 2 months before, he opened a play called The Dutchman, which was black against white, and which is preaching race hatred, really. And I think that he decided that our play was not his image, or he and his agent decided that wasn't his image at this time, But he wouldn't tell us that. He wouldn't tell Frank O'Hara, the other playwright. So he simply told us, we said, Willie, we have this theater offered to us. Would you please go sign? They want you to sign, to sign the contract. And he said, oh yes, I'll go tomorrow. He had no intention of going. He was just lying to us, and we'd rehearsed under a sadistic director. We'd rehearsed for weeks in the most horrendous conditions, and they both playwrights knew it, and they let the play die. And then Andy was making promises. Andy Warhol was making promises. So I said, this is too much. I said, either I kill them, both of them, and my father. Or I got on a plane to Europe. In fact, I got to Iceland, and it was on Finnair. And I got to Iceland, and I didn't know they changed the number of the plane at Iceland in order to confirm that some stupid international law. So when they announced flight, instead of announcing flight 452 that I'd gotten on in New York, they announced flight 670, So I'm sitting there, everyone else gets on the plane, I'm sitting there in the cafeteria, and then I see these huge doors close to the waiting room, like it was the only plane at the airport. And I thought, and then I ran around outside the airport building, and I saw that that's the only plane in the airport. Then that plane's taking off without me, and here I am in Iceland. I see the little huts like Jamaica, and a dreadful little wooden airport show. I said, "Oh, I'm not staying here." I climbed a fence. I ran out in front of. This is an old four motor, huge thing, 170 some passengers, but it was a propeller. I ran out to the front. It was like I said, and by the airport, people came dragging up. They said I came within just a few feet of being sucked right into the propellers. I would have gone right into the propellers. But I stopped the plane. Except the plane had to keep going. Once it got started, it had to taxi all the way out to the end. So this is at dawn in Iceland. So they put me on one of those movable stairs. I'm like a Viking, on top of these stairs. And we're going out there about 20 miles an hour to the plane, and the passengers are laughing at me. I was not going to be left in Iceland. Since I read that Iceland is quite beautiful, I could have taken a tour or something. But I had my... But I thought, if I stay there, then I'll end up going back to New York. So I got the plane. And I stopped the plane. Went to Paris. Nearly got robbed the first day in Paris, but I managed to survive and stayed there a couple of years, 3 years. Paris I loved. I had 2 great years there. The only problem with Northern Europe is I can't take the clouds. Like everything above Dijon, France, is clouds for about 6 months. And in the United States, except lately, New York has been having this cloudy weather. I'm thinking that if New York is going to have cloudy weather like Europe, I'd rather live in Europe because it's prettier, Paris especially. But in Paris, if the clouds would hang there for a couple of months, I would go nearly crazy. No matter how beautiful Paris was, I wouldn't. It was too much. I'd go take a train to Rome or something, see the sun. I couldn't bear the clouds in Northern Europe. Then the second year though was rain. It rained a great deal, but the rain would at least clear away the clouds, so I was all right then. There's only one of the. I think in New Orleans they have this kind of weather that hangs and stays there for days at a time. I saw Chelsea Girls at the Cinématheque in Paris, and I went with Jean-Jacques Lebel, who was sort of the leader of the young avant-garde in Paris, organized events and everything. He was very good at it. He's since inherited $100 million. I haven't heard from him. But he organized it. So we went to see Chelsea Girls, and Andy was there also, I believe. Although he tells the story differently in the book Popism. But my version of it is that he was there, that Jean-Jacques and half the French audience walked out. They couldn't believe what was going on. And I thought, well, that's New York, and what they're doing is for real, It's just a documentary, really. But they thought it was just spoof or something. They couldn't believe it. So I saw, and I told the Herald Tribune in Paris, or some people that I was just staying until the war in Vietnam was over, protesting the war, or really preventing myself from killing people by being in here. So then I think Andy was there, and Andy said, "Oh, Taylor, you've got to come back to New York. We're making movies." And then a few days later, I ran into Mickey Ruskin, who ran Max's Kansas City, the great most wonderful all-time restaurant ever, where the artists uptown and downtown came together. So, and Mickey Ruskin said, "Taylor, I've got a great restaurant. You'd fit right in there, all the crazy." So I thought about it about a week, and I went back to United States. The day I got off the plane, I started making movies with Andy again. We'd already made movies in 1963, then we started again immediately. It was a great year or two, and then Andy was shot. And that was the worst. The strange thing is, the woman who shot him, I was kind of sympathetic with her at the time. I thought she had some logic in her head, but I had lived in such a messy apartment. I sometimes didn't. I found a letter she'd written me a year later, or 2 years later, and I opened it, and she says, and this is right after I'd been on a talk show on David Susskind. In fact, David Susskind died the same day Andy did. Only Andy sort of wiped him off the front page. But I had done a television talk show with David Susskind in which we talked about Andy. It was very strange. I would have thought that they would have ran that show if TV people had been thinking, you know, or were able to be spontaneous. They would have run that show that night. But they've never. I don't think they've ever run it. And but anyway, I had on the David Susskind show. They'd ask me, well, what do you think? What do you think about this, Andy? You know, you all work with Andy. What do you do? What do you think? I said, well, what do you think about his artwork and everything? I said, well, his timing is great, but otherwise he's a hack. You know, the word H-A-C-K, hack. Which he wouldn't mind. Because he didn't mind anything. Yes, I'm a robot. I'm a hack. I do. He didn't care what you said. And so I thought, and then I was sort of defended. I forget what I said, but anyway, we put down Andy, but we also had a great time. And then I discover a year or two later, this woman, and this is right after, or just before Andy was shot, or soon after, something, not too long after. She had written me a letter saying, I'm going to get you, Andy, and Viva. I'm going to kill you, Andy, and Viva. I said, well, God. There is no, you know, this woman is crazy. Absolutely insane. In fact, she went to the Chelsea Hotel and Viva's husband put a knife to her throat and said, if you ever come around here again, if you ever threaten my wife, you're dead. She didn't. She never came around again. She vanished into the flotsam and jetsam. The flotsam and jetsam set. You know, there's a jet set and then the flotsam and jetsams. I'm a member of both. I had dinner with Bianca Jagger and Diane Brill the other night. So I'm up there and down there all over town. A video movie called A Couple of White Faggots Sitting Around Talking, because there was a famous play in New York, a couple of white chicks sitting around talking. So naturally we had to make a movie, A Couple of White Faggots Sitting Around Talking. Written by Gary Indiana, who's the art critic for the Village Voice. And a wonderful playwright. I think he's a better playwright than art critic, but he's always interesting, a terrific writer. And so we made a movie, and Michel Auder and Viva's daughter Alexandra was in it. And she sang a song about blackheads, which she made of herself. She's only 9 or 10 at the time. It's about 6 years ago. And it was a riot. It was a wonderful. And then she went on a scholarship to the High School of Performing Arts here in New York, which is very difficult to get into. And now she's doing a movie down in North Carolina with Viva. Viva's. I don't think Viva's in it, but she went down to. And Michel Auder made some wonderful films, but he sort of they're buried, you know, he doesn't really push them. And he's now married to Cindy Sherman, who's a very famous artist, photographer. Cindy Sherman is quite fantastic because she does color photographs of herself only. Huge things that are in the best galleries and museums in the world, really. And they're her in various costumes. She's a great actress, just as a still photo actress. And she'll play a nurse or a doctor or some person who's been suffering from an American attack on a village or something like that. That was her worst one, actually. That was her worst one. But generally, she just is brilliant. And so you have to really think to realize it's her doing it. And one of the stunning original talent. And Michel, but Michel started doing cut-up movies of atom bombs and things, which to me was very cliche. I was sorry he got into that, because when he had a storyline, it was much more interesting. But people always ask me, how do you get a hold of these movies? Who do you see? And I don't know. They're in limbo. They're just yeah. I guess the only thing to do is you have to be an artist, entrepreneur, accountant, promoter, thug to collect your money. You have to which was what Andy was. Thug, entrepreneur, businessman, and wound up with $100 million. They estimate, say it's 11 million, it's more like $100 million. They have so much work that they can just leak out to the public. And he was a tremendous collector. He was better than, it's the movie Citizen Kane about William Randolph Hearst. Well, Andy had a lot more taste than William Randolph Hearst. And Andy collected warehouses full of antique furniture and other people's paintings from his era and everything. And so he has a great fortune. Which unfortunately, the films I did are in with that, and they leak them out like. And films, the more you show a film, the more money it gets, and the more famous it becomes. But they look on it as just as objet d'art of Andy Warhol, as if we don't exist. And business-wise, I think that it's damn foolish, because. But it's hard to figure out what the motive was. And I think maybe the motive was he was just scared to death of real people. He wanted to be a robot, and he didn't want anything to do with people who might forget to oil his parts. But who's sorry now? And I'm trying to get my favorite song to be I Don't Care, I Don't Care. Or Keep Bitter, Keep It. I'll sing Keep Bitter to I Don't Care. I don't keep bitter. Right? Oh yes, I keep bitter, I keep bitter. I think I Don't Care is more fun. Il n'y a pas de quoi, il n'y a pas de quoi. I think you had a good interview.